Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Hey, good morning, Lamar. How are you doing?
Good morning, Tom. I'm doing just hunky-dory.
Has winter hit Kansas yet?
Well, it comes and goes, but yeah, it's hit. We don't have any precipitation to speak of, but we've had some cold weather. I put antifreeze and winterized my camper for the season, so it's out of commission right now. So yeah, it's winter in Kansas.
Oh, very, very good. Well, we've lived in a condo for the last several years, last 10 years, over a decade. And so now we're back in a house that has all these things that need to be tended to. And of course, one of those things is making sure that your faucets are turned off on the outside of the house so they don't freeze, right? So I got to do that as the temperatures began to drop. And we had a real cold blast last night. I woke up like 4 a.m. today, and I looked outside, and it was snowing like crazy. The wind was blowing, and I stood there, with a lot of anxiety because it was also recycling pickup day.
Oh.
And so our recycling was outside, and I just stood there and I watched all the recycling fly by from our neighbors and I thought to myself, great, I'm going to have to go out early morning and start picking up recycling and putting it back in the container before the trucks get here. So yeah. Oh, I honestly didn't miss that living in a condo. So.
Well, having your own house to take care of does have, its issues, right? So the only person when you start calling people to get help, it's going to start hitting your pocketbook too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No kidding. So.
And you've had a lot of deliveries because new house, new furnishings, and all of that. So you've had a lot of people coming to your house with deliveries.
Yeah. But here's the fun part, right? The city of Frederick, in all of its wisdom, decided to assign the exact same address. To do two different locations, two different houses, right? So we are getting these calls do you have a farmhouse? We're sitting outside this farmhouse with this delivery for you. And I go, no. And we don't actually appear on Google yet.
Oh.
And so on Google Maps. So if they Google us, if they go to Google Maps and put it in, we don't come up.
Okay.
And so it's like, oh my gosh, So
the housewarming gift that we sent you showed up at the house.
It actually did.
Okay.
And I don't know how, but it did. And actually they're slowly getting things figured out.
Okay.
It's been really interesting, but we did get that, and it's quite lovely. In fact, actually I should put a picture up of it because we did take a picture. Yeah. So,
yeah, well, we introduced you to a charcuterie board.
Yes, you did. What?
Yeah, well, if I say it again, I'm going to mess it up. So, a cheese board,
a cheese and sausage board. Right.
That's right.
Now, I can see the name, and I am forever going to call it a charcuterie, and I know that's not right.
That's close. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But I have another package coming to you, just so you know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So the shoe fly pie is made.
Yes.
And the rolls are made. We have frosting yet to make.
Yes.
And it's all frozen so that it stays cold in shipping. But I even have the boxes here already. It's ready to just put in the mail.
Oh, perfect. Well, if I can get my act together and make those Springler cookies, they will be in the mail to you within the week or so, I hope.
Okay.
So
I will send you a picture.
The holiday.
I'll send you a picture of the rolls and the pie. Maybe we could put them up on the, post it on the podcast.
I'll take a picture. Likewise, I'll take a picture of the cookies, assuming they come out.
Oh, they'll come out
in a way that's picture worthy. Well, you didn't see my pumpkin pie that I made last week.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. That ended up in the freezer. And then, then I went down to Weiss Market and then I bought a new one.
So does that mean that it was so good that you kept it from everyone else?
Well, actually, the filling was really good. The crust was not good. And and I didn't hand make the crust. I bought the crust, and those things that you unroll and you put them down. And the brand that I got, it frankly just was not very good. I won't say the brand because I don't want to get in trouble.
Sure.
But
did it start with a P?
No, I won't be getting that brand again. No, it did not start with a P.
well, I tell you what, if you want to take up a notch, we'd be happy to send you my wife's recipe for crust. It's awesome.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Yeah, we'll put it in the box.
Yeah, put it in the box. That sounds pretty good. Well, hey, enough of this fun stuff.
Yes.
We're actually going to have a lot of fun today because we have a special guest. We have Alex Bhattachargi, who is an author, editor, producer, and most importantly, his latest article came out just this week in the business magazine and website Inc.com about the XL shooting.
And that's INC period.
.com.
Yeah.
Right. .com. And we have a link to that in our show notes. And if you haven't seen the article, you'll be able to find it there and read it. But we are just delighted to have Alex join us today.
Absolutely. He's sitting in the green room. Let's get him out here.
Okay.
Well, we have just opened the door to the green room and brought Alex in to join us. Alex Bhattachargi from California. We are so happy to have you here. And I want to do a little bit of introduction, but again, thank you for joining us, Alex.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. And great to see you again, Lamar, and meet you, Tom.
How was the fruit basket back in the green room, by the way?
It was as filling as most foods, health foods in California. Not much, but since Lamar, when he was a guest, didn't get the fruit basket, I don't take it too personally that there wasn't one.
Well, we sent it from the Midwest, so dig down to the bottom. We'll see what's down there. But
you'll get here anytime. But
it's great
now.
To have you here. Okay. Well, I'd like to do a little bit of background for the listeners today with Alex. And I had a chance to meet Alex about, I guess, almost a year ago that we started communicating. But Alex, you are an award-winning editor. You're a writer and a producer. In the last 2.5 decades, you've worked as an editor. You've worked with some of America's leading literary voices, produced features that went to become best-selling books and documentaries and feature films. You've produced profiles and investigative stories, features on everything from food and travel to entertainment to social justice. You've appeared in numerous publications, Bloomberg, Businessweek, Entertainment Weekly, Esquire, etc. But when you reached out to me last, I think it was almost a year ago in December, I started doing the thing you do, right? Check it up on, and I began learning more and more about you. I even sent your email to Tom saying, is this guy is he legit? And you are very much so. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
We're trying to figure out what in the world you're doing here with that kind of resume. I mean, holy cow.
Well, we're going to talk, I'm sure, a lot about accuracy, authenticity, and fact checking. And let me just say, when Lamar asked me for my bio, I cringed because there's nothing quite so awkward as hearing your, what I call chest puffery, recounted back to you. And I think, well, I'm going to go back and make that a little less boastful sounding. But I'm very glad to be here, Lamar. It has been a long road. And even this recording has been rescheduled a few times. So I'm glad it's happening. And the story that we worked on together, I'm glad it's out in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you gave me, I think you sent me an email, and I I don't know if I was the easy fish for you to bring in, the fly fishing example there that we both enjoy. But, I did a lot of checking. I even grilled you a little bit before I was willing to spend some time talking with you about the mass shooting we had here at Excel Industries in Heston, Kansas. I've had a lot of people, a lot of journalists, a lot of reporters call me over the years wanting me to talk with them about that event, that tragedy. And I've been unwilling to do so because I just didn't feel the motivation was where I was comfortable. And I didn't know where it was going to go. But you took your time and you're very patient with me until I got to the point of saying, okay, I'm going to agree to this. So I think this could be a nice way for me to put a period on that event, but also to share the story of Heston, Kansas, Excel Industries, and the people involved in a very meaningful way, hopefully helpful to others. So thank you so much for how you approach that. And I was so happy that we could work together.
Well, thanks. I'm glad you took the time. And frankly, I'm also glad you took the time to really consider what it means to share the story. I think you're not the only one who had hesitations, in the Excel family and a number of people I reached out to. And this is a stance I completely respect. Some chose not to speak about it. For others, it was, I believe, and they've said it was helpful, and hopefully it's helpful to them, but also to people reading it. And it was a challenging story. It's a heavy responsibility to deal with that kind of subject matter, and even if we're very collegial now with some time between that, I wanted you and anyone else I spoke to in the story to know I take your experiences very seriously. I didn't take on the story lightly because of its gravity. And if I came in full of jokes and puns and wearing a party hat or my ugly Christmas sweater, you'd be right to just click and hang up. So I think how we approach interview subjects, how we approach people who don't have to talk to us if they don't want to, as journalists. I think it's important. I want to be a better representative than a lot of journalists and writers have represented themselves these days. So I'm an old school person that way. I do actually like the human connection that comes out of it because I think the stories that come out of it are more human.
Well, when you said that you were willing to hop on a plane and fly out here, that was also telling that you definitely are a person who likes to connect and see the story as well as hear it. And you've had a long career of telling stories. I mean, that's your life. That's what you do. What are some of the important lessons you've learned, but maybe no one tells you about when you are in journalism school or under tutelage of others? But what have you learned about telling stories, whether they're difficult or entertaining or interesting? What have you picked up that maybe no one told you about?
Well, first, no one tells you how hard it is to get a story off the ground and to get a media outlet to fly you to Kansas in early 2024, which is when that happened. But I think it's important, and I think that leads to the other lesson, which is everybody has a story, and if you want someone to trust how you're going to put a story out in the world, look them in the eye if possible, be honest, and meet them where they are. And if you want candor, offer candor. It's surprising. I don't do a ton of gotcha type journalism. I do ask hard questions from time to time, and I probably write some things that some subjects don't want to hear, but I try to take it pretty seriously. And, I think what they don't tell you is when you're face to face, how hard it is to ask hard questions. But by the same token, if you're face to face with someone, you see them as a human. And you see them as a person, and you understand the impact of what you're asking and how you're asking it. Going back to flying out, I have to thank the people at Inc., because that doesn't happen that much anymore. There's a real tendency to sort of do what we're doing now and leave it at that, which is at best to do a Zoom, where I don't know what's in the other room in your house, and you have no idea what my dog is doing in the living room in mine. And there's a resource expenditure, there's a time expenditure that hopefully makes the piece and a story you're telling better for the depth that it gets. And I was happy. Happy is a weird word to put to a story when you're talking about a mass shooting, right?
Right.
But I was more than willing and pleased to do it in person, because I thought the story would be better, and I thought the story deserved that. I would hate to have a story with such depth dealt with on a really shallow level and from a real distance. So hopefully it meant something to you that I was willing to do that, because it was really cold when I got to Kansas. It was like -8. So I moved to California to get out of get away from my East Coast cold weather. And boy, was I in for a chilly awakening. But warn people that, man, the weather was cold.
It was cold. So, and you touched on something that Tom and I talk about a lot, and that is relationships. We talk a lot about communication, how to do that, how to set that up, how important it is. And doing what we're doing now is certainly a step above, a phone call or email, et cetera. But being able to sit down across the table from each other and listen to each other, and there, I'll be honest with you, some of the time that you and I were talking, it's a very emotional time sometimes because of the subject matter and the experience, and for me to go there and walk through that without knowing someone or trusting them, I wouldn't have probably done that. But the fact that you were willing to put yourself out there and start a relationship, I think, made that possible. Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship piece of the work that you do? Because you do a lot of different kinds of things, but how do you approach relationships generally in your work?
Well, there are a number of kinds of relationships, and I do a number of interviews that are sort of drive through. You meet someone and then it's gone. The type of story you and I worked on and that you participated in is deeper, and I do think the relationships matter. I had to earn your trust, and I'm honored and humbled that I did. But that's not just true with you. That was true with some of the people who were present on the floor at Excel on that fateful February 25th of 2016. And to me, it's how I want to walk through the world. The golden rule. If I went through something really challenging and traumatic, I'd want someone to respect that. And if I hope to enter into a conversation and a meaningful one, I think I need to enter into that with the mutual respect. The relationships are strange. You and I, because of this piece was so delayed in its publication, we've had a lot of correspondence over the months. But there are some people I sent the story to just recently who I hadn't necessarily corresponded with since interviewing, except maybe to help set up a photo shoot. And it was nice, but also a little intimidating as to their reaction. I feel that's, I'm not here to simply please everybody who I interview, but I want to be fair, and I want to be honest and real, and I think that's the relationship standard I want to bring in my social interactions with friends, with family, as best as possible. And I think if I can be the same person in a relationship in professionally and personally, then I'm more authentic. And I think that, people's antenna and their BS detectors will not will acknowledge that. And sometimes I'll have to and want to open up about my own experiences. I'm not a real first person writer. I like to talk to other people and tell their stories. Uh, and I think everyone has a story, and it's my job to find it. And I think that levels up everybody, whether it's some A-list celebrity or some lovely and really interesting people who were working on the paint line at Excel. And I think if you approach that pretty evenly, people, you hope most of the people most of the time will pick up on that and meet you there. And so that's maybe just like a human skill. You were the human resources expert, Lamar. I won't step into your sandbox too much, but there's sometimes an interview isn't as collegial, and it's not as flowing, and it's a little herky jerky. And I certainly have some prompts and some tools in my in my little toolbox to try and jumpstart a conversation. But the relationships that come are real, and some people I've worked with again and again, and some people I've come back to in different contexts, and sometimes I'm sad to let someone where there's a relationship go. Maybe that's why we're on on this Zoom, about a year after we were driving around Heston.
Right. Well, what I did ask you, I think even when you were here, if you would be on this Zoom, you did respond like, yeah, I probably owe you one, right? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think I was twisting your arm, and then I thought about it, and I feel like we were in some weird wrestling move where you're twisting mine as I'm twisting yours. And, it's a two-way street. You should do that. And I appreciate it. I appreciate your efforts. I know that they were, some of them were visible to me. And I gather now that you checked around with sources like Tom and probably some other people in Heston to see if it was worth doing. And I feel it was worth doing. We can talk a little bit more about the process of working for a third party, which is, when it's your profession, something that you have to do. But I felt it was a worthwhile story. And so I'm happy to also just talk a little bit about how the sausage was made, which no one really wants to hear most of the time.
Well, that may be a nice segue into a question that I have for you, Alex. So we know you've interviewed and written about a lot of different subjects. And some of those subjects have included some very high-profile persons, and others include stories that are intriguing, but include those who are not well known but have impactful stories at the same time. So how do you choose and find the right story for you to tell? And then what do you and your editors do to ensure the story is accurate and as truthful as possible? So I know that's kind of a big question. You can feel free to condense it a little bit, but that was one of those things that's been kind of hanging out in our minds as we were preparing to talk with you today.
Well, condensing isn't always my forte. That's where the editors come in and they trim it back. But I'll answer the first part first. Like, how do the stories come about is often a question, and sometimes it's I do some for love and some for money, and I'll be upfront. Sometimes it's an art, sometimes it's a craft, sometimes it's a job, sometimes I'm deeply invested, and as I was with this story. Sometimes an editor has a need and brings me a sort of fully baked idea. Sometimes it's par baked, and it's up to me to sort of flesh it out and fill it in. Sometimes I have left field or other idea, and I'm pitching it, selling it, playing organ grinder monkey to the editor to convince them that it's the right story to tell. And for their particular outlet and in the way that it will benefit them. So it's a two-way street. If I have good relationships, which it goes back to again, I think there's a little bit of trust earned with some editors. In this case at Inc., that was true. They gave me a very short brief, which is, hey, how about a story? Because we're a business magazine. They said, and we deal with private companies and entrepreneurs a lot. How does a company recover from a major tragedy, say a shooting? And I would love to say I was off to the races from there, but if it was a race, it was really like I was the hare. I was not the hare. I was the tortoise, because it took a long time, a lot of research to get there. And then I'll try and condense and jump to the other part. How do you ensure it's accurate? And this is I think an issue that you guys seem to touch on in Third Space a lot, about trust and accuracy and honesty and respect. I do a lot of, it's hard work. I do a lot of research. There is sort of at best an iceberg approach to the work. What you see in the number of words that's published, or probably in the amount of time that's aired in a different medium. It's a small fraction of the time. I think that's true of most people who make anything. And I came into magazine journalism in particular as a fact checker. That was my freelance way in. It's how I learned the ropes. And I gotta say, it's not like the guys you see on CNN just sort of going through a speech and being like, "That's accurate. That's this. That's wrong." That's actually sexier than what I did, and how I view it in print, which is looking at every word in a story. And first you have to figure out what's fact, what's opinion, what's fact. Sometimes there will be a quote. Well, surely that person said it, but did they misquote a statistic? Did they say that we get our light during the day from the moon? And just because they said it doesn't mean it's true. So there's a lot of what could be sort of philosophical ideas of truth and fact, but it's pretty painstaking. And I think that's really served me well. I was an editor for many years, and I sort of put my gimlet-eyed view on some bold claims that were made in stories, and hyperbole, and things that just didn't pass the sniff test. And as a writer, for the last, I guess, 8 years, I tried to be accurate. I think if you can't make a good story out of what's true, it's not a story that you should probably be putting out there. And so that's my jigsaw challenge, is finding the facts and the truth that make a good story, and knowing that the story is only good if it's true. There's maybe a tendency to be like, oh, I wish someone had said this in a little more snazzy way, or that they wrote, they spoke like scripted people on TV do. But that's not always the case, including people who speak on TV don't always speak that way in real life. Mm-hmm. So you have to just sort of respect reality and bring some framing to it that makes it interesting, hopefully, but doesn't break the truth in that sort of compact you make with readers and editors, that you're someone to be trusted. I work with a lot of publications. Some are more concerned with that than others, and I'll probably just leave it there. But now that since I am a freelancer, I want my reputation. My reputation is my calling card, and it's important to me to not besmirch that or end up in a compromised position, because if it goes back to those relationships. If you're trustworthy, this sounds awful hokey. Like, hopefully people will want to work with you or speak to you, or in some way lend you their car, whatever the case may be. It goes professional and personal. It's very similar, I think.
You talked about coming to Kansas on a cold winter day. and and also convincing Ink Magazine that, hey, this is worthy of a trip, when that's not normally kind of the route that you go. So that's a story kind of in and of itself, that the work that you do, and working with the company that you're contracting with at the time. There's all that work that you do that really doesn't even come into the story itself. And I very much appreciated your style, your sensitivity, and working with the people here, and the amount of time you put in, because I think you put a couple of days in actually interviewing people and going around and looking at kind of who we are here in Heston. Um, so the story's just been published by Ink Magazine. Can you tell us a little bit, tell the listeners a little bit, okay, where's it published at? How can people read this, get to this story? And we certainly want to be able to post in our notes links as well. But can you kind of give us just how do people get to the story?
Well, I think it's in the early 21st century way, which is, I think you go to ink.com, and you should be able, if the search function works and you hit Excel or Industries or Heston, Kansas, it should populate. I'm going to make sure that you have what should be a gift link, so that there's no paywall. I think that's the least I can do for
Appreciate
you
that.
guys, bringing some attention to the story. Initially this was envisioned for print, but time went on, and there's all kinds of churn in the industry that made it hard to give this amount of space. And it's a story that needed a little bit of space. Brevity, as you guys already learned, is not my forte. The publication decided to put it online in a format that I think is nice. They still spent the money to do photo shoots. Lamar looks dashing, I should add. I appreciate their efforts. I think they knew that if you do a story like this, you have to give it the resources, or it's not worth doing. And so I appreciate my editor specifically on that, and I'm just glad it's out there. It has been a while. So I sat there, and as I communicated with you, I was like, I'm not sure it's happening, but I'm gonna faithfully recount that it will, and pass along everything I know. So I'm glad it's out there. I hope your readers can find it at ink.com, or maybe some of the social media channels. My own are very, very small and insignificant. So better to go to the big brand.
Well, we've got a link in the show notes, and it appears it might be that gift link that you were talking about,
Good.
Alex, because I think that folks should be able to open it up and go right to the article if they need to do that. But I got a question for you, very specific to the article. So
of course.
I was fascinated by something that you stated in that article. You wrote, with 15 employees shot, the incident at XL was and remains the largest non-political workplace mass shooting in this century. And so there's really kind of two questions. You may have answered one of these questions just a few minutes ago, but if you want to dive back into that just briefly, that would be fine. The first question is, what does non-political mean in this context? That was a phrase that kind of caught my attention as I read that. The other thing is that, what did you have to do to find this to be? This was an astounding fact that I read. I did not realize that about this shooting. I don't know if Lamar did or not, but
I had not either.
No. Yeah, it really caught me by surprise when I saw it. So I'm curious also to know, how did you uncover that fact? So those are the two questions: non-political, and how did you uncover that fact?
Well, it's a pretty specific phrasing, right? I'm not a good tap dancer, but that's probably the best tap dancing I've done in a while. So I'll say it's, when I was shown the story in preview on I guess Ink's staging site, and it had a headline like, what do you do after the worst shooting or the worst mass shooting in American history? And I was like, whoa. That's not accurate. So it speaks to this fact, which is accurate. This isn't it's a superlative of a certain kind, and that's a fact that I stand behind. But it came out of the research I did, which is looking at a whole bunch of tragic events of different scales, all tragic in their way, and all sort of caused by different reasons. And the why of this is probably something we'll never know. But in some cases, there were manifestos, and there were political or racial or religious animations behind these heinous acts. And so we left those aside. What we wanted is to sort of look at what it's like for a workplace to recover when a coworker has a break of some kind or some event that happens, and not necessarily tackle some of the big world issues, to stay on a track that lets us focus on the workplace and what happens there in the aftermath. And that's profound enough. There were some bigger ones in the 90s. We didn't want to go so far back. That memory had completely faded, and we wanted enough time to have passed for there to be perspective and for the company to have evolved. And in this case, Excel not only evolved, but it changed hands. So it goes back to a lot of the criteria that the editors and I looked at in looking at the story. And also, it was a company that happened to be big enough where I had a decent confidence. Some people would talk to me. I spoke with a few individuals at a very small family-owned company where the proprietor was killed in a shooting, and they did not want to speak because it was a very small cohort, and they were all so impacted they didn't want to revisit it. And so the criteria sort of led me to that fact, and it's a big news story, and it was for a very short period of time. Sadly, the news media moves on, but this still is it's a big event, and never bigger. If it's a big event to me, I can't even speak to how big it is to Lamar and the people in Heston and at Excel.
So could I focus that just a little bit, because I want to make sure people get this. When you say a non-political workplace mass shooting, and the operative word here being non-political, what you're talking about is that there was not this the kind of thing where they afterwards they would find a manifesto from the shooter that was declaring, I'm doing this, for this particular cause or that particular cause. This was a shooting that just involved an individual that, for whatever reason, but not for political purposes. I just want to be as clear on that as we can be.
Yes.
Okay.
And while we don't know exactly what motivated the shooter, a man named Cedric Ford in this case, to do it, we have some indications and there's no indication that it was political, and there was no manifesto. So yes, your succinct answer and description is right. But it's also worth noting that workplaces are sadly the most common venue for mass shootings in America, and they're very little explored, which is something I only uncovered in researching this. And so it felt important that Inc. was covering this, because they do cover businesses, and I think a lot of business owners don't understand, and don't want to think about the unthinkable. So yes, political stuff is not part of it, as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can certainly echo that. Businesses and companies don't really want to talk about, about this happening. I have spent the last 4 years plus, speaking to various business groups about the shooting as a way to answer questions, talk about preparedness, talk about things that work for us, etc. What I did find, particularly in the human resource and ownership groups that I've spoken with, a real interest in what is it that we can do to try to be prepared for any kind of a disaster. What are the things we have to think about? What's important for us to have in place already? And so there's interest there, but as far as wanting to talk about it openly, that I would agree that that's something that I'm finding folks obviously don't want to talk about. And in this particular situation, as you were talking with Inc. Magazine, talking with the editors, and kind of following leads, how did you stumble across Excel? And once you kind of got that incident in front of you, what was the process of preparing? You've talked a little bit about that, but can you kind of talk about what, from the time it started, first of all, how much time did it take you to do it from beginning to end? And kind of what was that process, that one brick after the other you had to lay?
Well, it was a long process. It's a long process from when we spoke to it being published, and it was probably a few months of research and conversations with the editors at Inc. to find the right event and incident to examine. And we held a few up to the light that didn't seem right for a variety of reasons, either political motivations that maybe took the focus in a different direction. And the sad part is I had a lot of research to do because there were a lot of incidents to review.
Right.
Inc. It tends to deal with entrepreneurs and privately owned companies. So, Excel being owned at that time by the Mullet family felt like it was an appropriate subject to consider and cover. And so, each outlet and publication has its own sort of focus and mission. So this one really sort of came into the lane for Inc. And there were a lot that I did consider, as I said, and some didn't seem promising, and some didn't want to talk, and didn't have enough individuals around that. Even if some people didn't want to talk, as in the case here with Excel, that there might be enough other people who I could speak to. And then the more I read, the more I was interested. And, it was an interesting reading list. If you looked at my browser history for a while there, a lot of not happy stories to read.
Mm-hmm. So with your story coming out, and Lamar and I have both had a chance to read that story at this point, it's obvious that the shooting really impacted many people in many different ways. So at the risk of making this too personal, as you walk through preparing to write that story and in the process of writing that story and conducting the interviews, what did you experience? How did that story impact you?
Well, I like, it's not about my emotions, right? This is a story about other people's aftermath. But I was emotionally affected, talking to multiple people about these difficult events, and trying to understand what it meant to Lamar, to someone like a gentleman named Adam Miller, who was shot multiple times, to try and understand what it might be like, to use a little bit of the empathy that I try to bring. Yeah, I was profoundly affected. I remember it was frozen. I went to the memorial behind Excel Industries, which is a small memorial park. Everything was frozen over. The snow was hardened, but there were a couple of dried bouquets of flowers that were there. And I just sat down, even in that -3 or 4 degree weather, and I wouldn't say I cried, but I needed to gather myself. And I, you know, I think the idea of being completely dispassionate um, may seem like a journalist's role, but I don't believe that telling human stories, uh, I'm not some sort of robotic, tell me your feelings, I have none. Like I said, I want to meet people where they are, and I'd be remiss or lying to you if I said I wasn't affected. It was heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it was, and as I mentioned, I think we emailed a little bit after I read the article, and it was emotional reading it for me. And I've certainly heard about this and known about this, for ever since it happened. And Lamar and I have talked about it on numerous occasions, and so I can only imagine the challenge, perhaps, of being in your shoes and trying to get the clarity of the story, and at the same time, yeah, I mean, everybody's only human, right? So you're trying to get the clarity of the story, and at the same time, you're a person not just with a head but with a heart as well. So I could imagine it. There were moments when it was really challenging. So thank you. I appreciate your honesty and openness on that.
And I think that's something that taking from my perspective, bringing someone into the story, even if it's your job and you're putting together a story about the experience, and this is maybe my HR and psychology background, is that I know that if you bring anybody into this story in a real way, it's going to have an impact one way or another. And so personally, I was kind of careful over the years who I did bring into that story, and how I brought them in. And Tom has been wonderful as a friend over the years to be one of the very first people I brought into the story, even soon after it happened. I think that, um, as I look at your role as the writer and the storyteller, um, this becomes part of your experience in a way. And certainly hearing as many different pieces to the story as you did when you were here and the phone calls, etc. You are not only a writer, but you're also now kind of a participant at this stage of the story. I am curious because I know you have a lot of information, and know that not everything that you heard or information you gathered either made the final cut in the story, or you chose not to even put in the story for whatever reasons. But I am curious, as you were taking all this information that you gathered and putting it together, what did you find, number one, the most challenging piece to synthesizing that information, and also kind of what was leading you to decide what was important part of the story?
These are good questions. Are you sure you're not the journalist, Lamar? The mission of the story probably dictated what ended up on the editing room floor a little bit. There were some really powerful things, and maybe some things I, as a writer and journalist, felt were moving and important, but maybe weren't as focused on the readership of Inc. magazine, who commissioned this. So they're the portal to the outside world and their readership. And so there were some things I was sad to see not make the story. And then there were some ways in which it was liberating to have that focus, so that trying to tell every detail and every feeling would just overwhelm the story itself and the reader and me. But it was hard to leave some important and some powerful moments aside. That's, I think, the trade-off of having a tighter, more consumable piece. But even the stuff that wasn't in the story, you guys are focused on the third space, and communication and civil discourse. And for me, all that other information gave me context and helped me understand things, even if it didn't make the story. It helped me understand nuances that maybe changed a word choice here or there in the words that did remain. And all of it was helpful. Some people who did not end up quoted in the story gave me some very helpful insights that helped me ask better questions of a different subject, and probably have helped me since. So it's, there's, as media goes, there's fast food, there's real clickbait, and there's slow food, which I talk about a lot because my wife's an Italian American. We got to eat the Italian way. And this was definitely slow food. There were a lot of ingredients that I cooked down for a long time, but I think they all added something to it, and they certainly added to my thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you alluded to the fact that, what we do with this podcast is we try to focus on civil dialogue, civil conversation. And part of creating that third space that we talk about and having a dialogue is having trust, both in the process and in the people. And so we have tried to explore the importance of getting good, reliable, trustworthy information when we use information in these conversations. So, because so much information that is published or shared, even in just one-on-one conversation, seems to be misinformation or disinformation that is intended to persuade or influence another person. So one of the questions that has emerged for us is that as a journalist, editor, writer, and producer, how do you build and then navigate trust with your audience, as opposed to trust with individuals, but trust with your audience as you tell the stories that you tell?
Also a really good question. I hope in the midst of so much mistrust of media, that I have that trust. First, I don't take it for granted, and I think it's earned every piece and in every interaction. And it evolves. Here we are speaking, and I don't remember every fact that I put in the story certainly as vividly as I did when I was writing it and turning my draft into the editor. And I think the trust comes from saying there's some things I don't know. Let me slow down and check. And of course, the reader doesn't see that, but I that slow preparation sometimes really helps. I don't pretend to be the loudest person in the room or the smartest, but I want to say something that has some meaning, and maybe I think about it for a minute before I speak. And I'm not someone who's just going to be a bull in a china shop. So hopefully that comes across. It's not going to come across to everybody. I realize I might be speaking to a smaller audience than Joe Rogan, or somebody who's, very extemporaneous and has a lot of personality. I hope I have a little personality, but my brand hopefully is trust. And if I do say it, hopefully I've thought about it, or if I've written it, hopefully I've really researched it. That said, people can take issue with me. I'm not immune to that, and I'm not thin-skinned, and someone may not like a story I've written about them, and I can't really control that. I have to trust in myself that I did follow the process, and I did the right reporting, I did the right framing, I did my research, and I stand by it. It's an aggressive thing to say I stand by my story. Like I'm infallible. I'm very fallible. Every human is, every journalist is, and but I try and check my work and hopefully stand by it. I'll also take my lumps when I need to.
Okay.
That's helpful. I think Tom and I have talked a lot about, particularly in this last political cycle, um, where with the question, where are people getting their information? And that's a whole series of podcasts, I think, to really go down that road. But the turnaround of information and how quickly people who are assuming some role of being an authority on information are sharing information that just doesn't seem to be carefully vetted or supported, is a concern for all of us. And then on the consumer side, those people who are hearing the information and making judgments and huge decisions sometimes off of very questionable information is a big concern for, I think, all of us as well. We've also seen the conversations that you talk about conversation being very important, or relationships being very important, and we talk quite a bit about civil conversations. But can you kind of give us your perspective on what makes a conversation civil? What makes it work? What is it as you're communicating with people, whether it's with your editors or whether it's with the people that you're interviewing? What makes a civil conversation happen? What are the ingredients for you?
Well, I think dialogue, not monologue.
Okay.
Speaking with someone, not at them. And this is maybe so simple that you want to come through the Zoom link and kick me under my desk, but you actually have to listen. As an interviewer, I come in hopefully with some questions, but I've always found that the best information and the most interesting revelations come from a follow-up. Someone says something and I think, hey, I heard something in that I want to ask you more about.
Okay.
Well, first, that tells the person who said it that I listened to them. So hopefully that builds a little bit of trust. But for me, it helps me get the information I need to understand whatever the topic is. And this, that takes a little bit of time. But, turn off the mic, turn on the headphones for a minute is probably good advice. Probably, you're the psychologist, Lamar. Probably good relationship advice, probably good workplace demeanor, and asking questions if you think you misheard something.
I think follow-ups. I think listening, like deep listening, is probably the key to that civil conversation. And I don't always have to agree to things I listen to, but maybe I just have to hear them out. And doing that for a living maybe has helped me do that. I hope it does. Okay. How about, I imagine you guys have done a lot of interviews. You have to hear people say some things and maybe you don't agree with them. But
I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I think even Tom and I, as we relate to each other, listening to each other is really important because both of us can get on a conversation rant and go quite a bit down the road.
Well, not me. Not me. So only 2 or 3 an hour. I mean,
right. But sometimes our conversations go pretty long. We realize, it's time for us to cut this off and get on with their day. But so one of the things that we ask quite a bit, and we think about it, we talk about it quite a bit. It's widely observed, and we share this observation that democracy, not just in the U.S. but around the globe, is fragile. We think of South Korea right now. We think of France and some other countries, as well as the U.S. But the democracy is fragile and may, in fact, be in danger. What role, from your opinion, from your perspective, what role does civil conversation play in maintaining a democracy?
Well, I mean, is it too simplistic to say it's essential? It's at the heart of it. Agreeing to disagree, respecting people who have different opinions, finding coalitions, finding commonalities comes out of a longer conversation. Good information really helps. I think the disinformation idea the weaponization of information from one nation to another to sort of stir the pot or destabilize elections or issues somewhere else is really deeply upsetting to me as someone who is really slow and methodical and painstaking in the stuff I put out there. Tone. We talk about electronic media and a lot, and I think you spoke with one of the Kansas state senator who was speaking about this. And when we first get into email, tone is lost. Text, right. Some tone is lost. Mm-hmm. Limited characters in social media, some tone is lost. And when you look someone in the eye or you hear them, even the phone or a Zoom, you can hear some tone. You can hear when someone's being sarcastic. You can hear when someone is maybe being sensitive or vulnerable. And that means it's a two-way thing. You're seeing them as three-dimensional and you're treating them as as real people. I probably didn't have many impressions about Heston, Kansas, or even Wichita, which I flew into. I think being open, and just, I have a few. I don't pretend I know everything about it. I was there for a few days and met some very nice people who I might not have that much in common with otherwise. There's the power of civil discourse.
You just mentioned in your response to Lamar's question there about access to good information. And of course, that's one of the things that Lamar and I just find to be kind of maddening at times, is this idea of people getting access to and taking the time to read or to get valid, truthful information and read information that is really valid before they attempt to engage in conversation. So this is like the question that solves all the problems in the world. All right. So you get a chance to solve all of the problems in the world with this question. How do we encourage people to read and experience civil, valid, and truthful information that they can include in dialogue and conversation? I'm sure you have the answer to that, Alex.
I do.
I hope.
But I'm not going to share it with you because it's really valuable. It is. But we probably don't have enough time. Wow. How do we encourage them? Make it good. Make it compelling. Do better. Not entertain. Not like. Don't necessarily have to do it through like the most hyperbolic, histrionic headlines and teasers on a news show. The weather doesn't have to be catastrophic. Sometimes it's just 62 and cloudy. This fight for everyone's attention, it goes to the lowest common denominator and it runs away. And then you find that, it's not really satisfying. It's quick and you need more. And it's like, I don't want to tell people to eat their greens and take their medicine. It needs to reach them. Journalists and the information providers need to do better. I call journalism an industry without a business. It's not, the good work doesn't necessarily make a lot of money because it's painstaking and slow, and the fast work is what probably brings a return. Maybe if we all went to dial-up, it would be better and slowed down, but that's not going to happen. Sadly, I don't think there's one thing. There's no one answer. It's really pulling together a bunch of strings, and that's good for you guys because I know you have other episodes, so you can bring those other strings together one at a time.
Well, so now you get one of my non sequiturs, Alex, because in your response, you mentioned the weather thing, and the thing that I have noticed is that we have to have a name for every weather phenomenon now. It's not just enough to say it is 62 and cloudy. It is cloudy again, or something like, we've got to have a name for it. It's like, no, we don't have to do that. It might just be, cloudy and 62. Or in California, it might be every day 72 and sunny. But it doesn't necessarily need a name, does it, to really make it more special?
Well, when someone's has to give you weather 24/7, 365, 366 on leap years, I mean, I feel the challenge that they face. I do, and that the every click and every moment they can capture people's attention, adds their bottom line. But it would be sort of a cheeky thing to have like the most boring weather reports ever. They used to be the most boring parts. That's when you used to be able to go to the bathroom during a half hour show.
Oh, wait a minute. You didn't grow up in the Midwest, Alex. The weather was the most important thing on the newscast, right, Lamar?
That's absolutely.
We'd all sit around waiting for the weather, and as soon as the weather was done, we'd go to bed because we had to get up early the next morning to milk the cows. So, yeah.
Well,
but I hear you.
And that's the thing I need to respect. The weather wasn't that important in New York. Only if it would shut down the subways and I could get it. You didn't, or buses, and I didn't have to go to school.
That's fair.
Those were the good days. Everything has to be the most, the this, the that, and like I said, I saw that when somebody, I don't know who, was trying to put this story on the Excel shooting up on the website, and it had to be the most. And in this case, the most is most awful, right? Even more tragic than what was there.
Yeah. And I actually think you landed on a really good title for it, by the way. I really do. Alex, how can people follow you if they, not that we're asking them to stalk you or anything like that, but how can they actually follow you, know what you're up to, and know what some of the things are that are coming out from you?
Well, my last name's very long, so it's sort of a stalker defense. Because you have to spell it right. It doesn't really stop bill collectors, unfortunately. I do have a personal website. It's my name, alexbhattachargi.com, which, of course, I could spell for you, but you have a limited amount of time.
We'll put it up on the screen and in the show notes. You're good.
I'm occasionally on social media, but I wrestle with all the things we've been talking about myself, and I got work to do. I can't be on social media all the time. But I think if they go to my website, they'll find most of the work I've done, and they'll be like, "Who is this person? And is he schizophrenic?" Because it's all over the map.
Yeah. Well,
I've been to your website actually, and it is informative. So you're doing a good job.
Thank you. I've been to your, the Third Space, getting the Third Space website and read the show notes and all that stuff as well, because I do research.
Oh, well, so Alex, we like to turn the tables a little bit and give the guests an opportunity to ask us any questions that they would like to ask about us or the podcast. So we're going to turn it over to you. Do you have any questions for either one of us or both of us?
I want to know, obviously I agree with and I believe in the mission that I've gleaned from the website, but from the podcast, and I've read show notes going back, but what was the spark that made you guys decide we're going to figure out how to use microphones and record podcasts, whether we're moving houses, doing this or that? What was the tipping point that got you guys to act on that impulse?
Well, for me, it was desperation. And I retired this year, but prior to that, I had a consultancy that worked with nonprofit organizations around community engagement, community change, organizational change, those kinds of things. And at the start of the pandemic, I was under contract to do a lot of work face-to-face with people. But all of our material was designed for in-person training and consultation. So everything had to be changed up and moved over to a video format. And so reluctantly, I ended up getting a whole bunch of equipment and software and and learning how to do video and audio and editing and all of that kind of stuff. I hate to say this, but that is not when you're just a few years from retirement, that's not the kind of thing you want to have to do, is suddenly have to learn a whole new set of skills, right? So there was that one sense for me, it was a necessity to actually get behind the microphone, the camera, and all of that kind of stuff. But I will say that when Lamar and I began to think about this, and actually during the pandemic, Lamar and his spouse and I and my spouse, we started meeting every Saturday morning for coffee by Zoom. And through those conversations, what seemed to evolve was this idea that, we were coming at the end of the previous presidential administration, getting ready for the 2020 elections. The political division and the possibility of people actually coming together to sit down and talk in a reasonable way with one another about such things seemed to be getting more and more challenging. And Lamar and I began to kick around the idea, what small thing could we do that might help address this situation? So that's how I remember it. Lamar may have an entirely different memory about that.
Well, no, the coffees on Saturday morning through COVID were, first of all, they were lifesavers from boredom, because it's like, I can't go anywhere. I can have coffee. My wife and I can have coffee with Tom and his wife. But I think, for me, the varied career paths that I've kind of taken, from even prior to doing clinical work as a psychologist, I was doing pastoral work and, in northern Indiana, and it just working with people in general, and moving to Heston, working at the college, working with student life, working with administration as an administrator, etc., and then moving over to Excel, developing and working with human resources, which, it's just a lot of people stuff that we've done. Both Tom and I have done over the years. And dealing with everything from severe tragedies over those years, to developing programs and developing teams and developing people. So we both, I think, love that kind of stuff. When I got to the point of my career saying, I'm done working for somebody, now I want to work for myself. But what does that mean? Well, what do I love to do? Well, as you know, Alex, you met with me in my photography studio. So that's an area that I'm developing. It's a way for me to connect creatively with people and to do even some of my own stuff solo. But the other thing I love doing is exploring ideas, is problem solving, is looking at what could be versus what is. And this area of communication, of information sharing, just was so important to me, and in our conversation with Tom as well, that this, and Tom had done a lot more of this kind of thing than I had, and so this looked like a fun opportunity. We were going to do 5 episodes and out. We started in October. We thought, well, if we can make it till Christmas, we're done. And we're starting our 3rd season here coming up. So that's how I got interested in it. It gave a platform to begin to work with some ideas, want to continue to interact with people. And we're looking for ways outside of this podcast to even work with people on problem solving and idea sharing. So that's kind of what's kept me connected. It's just very stimulating. It doesn't pay squat, but it's very stimulating.
Can I ask one more question?
Fact,
I have an
idea.
idea.
Sure.
I have a thesis.
Yeah.
That I'm curious about. You guys have known each other, I gather, for many, many years and in different contexts.
About 50 some.
Oh, that's it. Okay, so we just met. Spring Chicken says,
yeah.
Have you respectively learned a detail or a thing about each other through this podcast that you didn't know beforehand?
I don't think I knew the learning curve that Tom was going to go through on things like the technical side of what he's been going through. He's going through that a lot more than I do. He does the editing, etc. But the lighting, the camera stuff, because I've always seen Tom as very technical, and so that was something I kind of surprised me. But Tom is very tenacious. And he grabs onto something and goes with it. So I've seen him work and wrestle with that. That was a piece that I didn't know. That's kind of a benign piece. I don't know, Tom, where you might go with that.
Well, I think I think that what I have really come to appreciate, because I have seen and learned more about Lamar, is I remember him from our teenage years as always being fascinated in photography. And he introduced me to my first single lens reflex camera, which was a Pentax K1000, which still sits up on a shelf somewhere, but it doesn't work anymore. I did not realize just how gifted he was as a photographer, and I think I have come to appreciate that more through the not so much through the podcast, but through the conversations we've had getting ready for the podcast, and him sharing photos with me that he's taken. This last weekend he shot some really sweet and great photos of his grandkids, and he dropped them to us, and we looked through those just aghast yesterday. I mean, they were just beautiful. We're going through them. So, oh my God, that is just so good. So I don't know that I really got how much photography really, really spoke to your spirit and soul, Lamar. So
thank you.
Well, my thesis, if I'll say, is like when you get in a new context or out of your comfort zone, you really find out things about yourself and people, and you don't make assumptions, and you start to really take in information and consider it without an agenda. And that's that's why I like doing different types of stories and talking to you guys and seeing that you guys speak to a wide range of guests, including humble freelance magazine writers like myself.
Well, I hope we can have you back sometime, Alex. I am not going to raise it in this particular podcast, but I am so fascinated by this article that came out that you wrote in Rolling Stone in August about the connection between Sammy Davis Jr. and the Satanic Church. I have so many questions I want to ask you about that, but I got to read the article first, right? But
I just got it
to you back.
I would be happy to come back for that. I'm glad in a way that it doesn't mean that there has to be another mass shooting for that.
Oh, so absolutely.
I tend to go light, heavy, and try and come out somewhere in the middle. But I'm very curious what you think.
Okay, we may just put a link to that as well in our show notes, and as a teaser for a future interview with you about that, because I think you're revealing some information to us that I certainly didn't know about the Candyman.
Yeah. And I got to tell you that I've been a fan of Sammy Davis Jr. and the Rat Pack for a long time, and so when I saw that, I said, I got it. I did a skim through. I haven't even read it in depth, and I sent it to Tom real quick because I come across it last night. So, but more than that, Alex, this whole experience, me personally, having met you and been able to work with you, I got to tell you, I feel like I've developed another friendship in the world, and I appreciate so much how not only you handled the story, but how you, in a way, took care of the people you were interviewing, including me, through that process. So thank you. Job well done. I encourage people to read the magazine article in Inc. Magazine. Contact us if you're having challenge connecting with that. We'd be happy to connect. So thank you so much, Alex, and I look forward to staying connected.
Likewise, I feel like we've connected. At the time we first spoke, Clayton Clark was just lighting it up in college. The whole WNBA season has gone.
Right.
Time passes. But yeah, I do feel like it's nice to connect, and maybe there's the message towards getting to third space that comes from that.
Absolutely.
We wouldn't have connected otherwise.
Are we going to have to send you a Caitlin Clark shirt or what?
Yes, please. Of course.
If we can find one anymore.
I mean, you've got a good, there. Good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
But, that's a little bit of like getting to third space is if you talk to someone, you find you have something in common. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everyone has a story. Everyone has something in common. And I appreciate what you guys are doing. And I'm really glad to have connected with you, Tom, today. And
likewise.
Lamar over these many months of delays.
All right. Well, we look forward to staying connected, and hopefully we can do this again.
I hope so. Thank you guys so much.
All right.
Thank you. Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space.